Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, we're going to take a look at who the Leafs could possibly sign or trade for to be their backup goalie for next season. Because this whole thing of having only one viable goalie over the last 3 years, I'd say, is not something that I would like to see continue. But I think it's first important to understand what the Maple Leafs have in a guy like Jack Campbell. He's only played 86 NHL career games, 79 of those coming in the last 3 seasons, and a lot of people question his ability to be the guy, right? Because of his health and just his lack of a track record. From March 20th of this past season, Jack Campbell played in 19 out of a possible 25 games. And if you want to include the playoffs, he played in a possible 26 out of 32 games for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Carrying a .917 save percentage in those 19 out of 25 games, and then pretty much matching Carey Price save per save in the first round of the playoffs. So yeah, I totally get the concern with both his health and then just the sample not really being large enough to come up with anything conclusive. It's just 26 games. So I do understand the concerns of his health and there not necessarily being a long enough track record to fully trust this goalie, but at the same time, I do find optimism in that 26 out of a possible 32 game stretch where he was basically everything that the Leafs could have needed or wanted from their goaltenders, especially with the way that Frederik Andersen struggled over the last year and a half or so. But regardless if I can find optimism in that stretch of games or not, I still do believe that the Leafs need to find a good 1B option to play with Jack Campbell. So on the screen right now are a variety of goalie stats, and I'm including Jack Campbell, Frederik Andersen, David Rittich, and Michael Hutchison in this table compared to a number of UFA goalies that are going to be available this summer. And usually goal save above expectation is the stat that you want to look at when it comes to goaltenders, but all advanced analytics have some flaws in them, so that's why I have the wide variety of contextual stats to accompany it, because goals saved above expectation really does penalize goalies who play in front of strong defenses. Because you can be a really good goalie on a really good defensive team, but because your team is so strong defensively, you're not going to get as many opportunities to show how great of a goalie you are. So you're not going to be able to contribute to this statistic as much as you would if you were a really good goalie on a poor team. And a lot of these stats will make more sense as we talk about each individual goalie, but the guy that I want to start with, we'll start at the bottom and work our way up here, is 29-year-old Peter Mrazek. He's faced the 5th most high danger shots against per 60 out of the 12 goalies on this list and finds himself with a pretty decent high danger save percentage. The Canes over the last couple of seasons have done a very good job at limiting shots from the home plate area, which is what you would classify a medium danger shot, and a high danger shot is obviously just point blank right in front of the net, but doesn't have the greatest medium danger save percentage. So I can classify this goalie as someone who makes a lot of the saves that he shouldn't, but maybe allows a couple that he probably should have. And that could be a frustrating type of goalie to watch, especially if you're not adding up all the individual expected goals against on every single shot that is being allowed. But if you're looking at the final result here, the final result is telling us that Peter Mrazek's a pretty damn good goalie. Halak, I think, it does a good job explaining what I was talking about earlier. The Boston Bruins do a good job at limiting the number of high danger and medium danger shots that they allow, but he still has a pretty respectable high danger save percentage, but not necessarily the best medium danger save percentage, and that reflects in the goal saved above expectation. He's not getting the same amount of opportunities as Peter Mrazek does in Carolina to show that he can save those high-quality scoring chances, but he's allowing some goals that he probably should have had. Thus, that's why you're getting that negative number. There's probably better options on this list, especially with him being the most senior goalie here, but if there's one thing that I will say about Jaro Halak is that, man, that guy doesn't flinch when it comes to adversity. That's literally been his whole career, whether you look back to his time in Montreal or even a brief stint in Washington with the Islanders and then with the Bruins filling in for Tuukka Rask when he's been injured over the last couple of years ago. He's a very, very versatile goalie. He's a very low maintenance goalie. And I think in your backup goalie, that is something that you want. Someone who is very low maintenance and someone who you can say, hey, you're starting tonight like 2 or 3 hours before the game, and he doesn't have a problem with that. Laurent Brossoit's numbers, I believe, are being dragged down from his 1920 season. His 2021 season was far better than what these numbers are showing. But again, over the last 2 seasons, kind of similar to Yaroslav Halak, actually facing the most high danger shots against per 60 out of the 12 goalies here, having a respectable high danger save percentage, but again, allows goals that he probably should have. And that's why this number is a negative. Not a bad option, but there's probably some better ones, so let's move on. Reimer, I think, would be an interesting option depending on what kind of a Leaf fan you are. Some people really, really love him, and some people are just kind of indifferent or not really understanding of why so many people love him. But at the same time, he's been decent in Carolina over the last 2 years. This past season wasn't necessarily too great. His 1920 numbers are propping this up quite a bit, but at the same time, over the last 2 years altogether, this is a goalie who's faced quite a few high danger shots against per 60, not saved very many of them, but stops a lot of the shots that you would expect him to. And you know what? I can respect that, right? He's not the guy, but as long as your defense in front of him plays relatively well, he's not going to cost you games, if that makes sense, but he's not going to steal any for you either. Not a bad option, but again, with him being 33 by the time next season rolls around, I don't think he's necessarily the type of goalie that the Leafs are looking for, and we'll get more into that once we've talked about the guys on this list. Ullmark would be an interesting option. He's a little bit younger. He does have a bit of an injury history, but again, this is a goalie over the last 2 seasons who's stopped the majority of the shots that you would expect him to, but it doesn't necessarily steal games for you. But he'd be coming from the Buffalo Sabres, and I don't know how to interpret any of the numbers from the players that come from that team, really. Bernier would be equally as weird as Reimer, but I don't necessarily think that he's the type of goalie that the Leafs are looking for, with him being 33, but he's found a nice home in Detroit. I think that that's a good relationship between him and the Red Wings. He's faced an absurd amount of high danger shots the last 2 seasons and has a respectable save percentage on those shots, but maybe not necessarily stopping as many of the shots as that you would expect him to, but he is definitely making up for it by saving a lot of those high quality shots, and that reflects in the goals saved above expectation. Ronta had some injury problems last season. He's 32 years old. His 1920 numbers are propping up the data quite a bit here. But then again, the Coyotes really did struggle last season. This is a goalie over the last 2 seasons who's faced an absurd amount of high danger shots, has an okay high danger save percentage on those shots. But again, he faces a lot of medium danger chances and saves a crazy amount of them, and that's why that goal saved above expectation is positive. Chris Driedger, however you say it, he's probably number 1 or number 2 on my list and who I would prefer here. But it's not all sunshines and rainbows. He's not just the clear-cut number 1 option here. He does come with a little bit of an asterisk in that these numbers are only in 35 games. So that may be concerning. It's a small sample, but it's a good one with a 931 save percentage and 838 high danger save percentage, the highest out of any goalie here, and a very, very respectable medium danger save percentage. This guy makes a lot of the saves that he probably shouldn't, and he makes a lot of the saves that he should. Just excellent. The excellent numbers. And this is probably the most you can strip back the Leafs roster without making any drastic changes that they don't seem to want to make this offseason. And this is with them losing a guy like Travis Dermott, maybe to the Seattle expansion draft. Maybe you trade a guy like Hull, you trade a guy like Kerfoot. You start the season with Pierre Engvall in the minors, and that leaves you with $15.8 million in cap space. maybe you get 2 top 6 forwards and you split about $8 million between the two of them. Maybe you spend about $2.5 million on a shutdown centerman, and you have just a healthy scratch, making about $900K or so. This leaves you with about $4.4 million to get a backup goalie and your 6th defenseman. I lied. Maybe the healthy scratch is 850 grand, and maybe it's Ben Hutton, a little bit more of a defensively minded defensive defenseman, someone who's not afraid to drop the gloves as much, can throw some hits or so. You're left with about 220 grand if you're paying your backup goalie about 3 million bucks. 220 grand to start the season isn't a lot of cap space to work with, but if you're able to consistently stay under the salary cap during the regular season and bank space and save space, and then when you consider that salaries are prorated come the trade deadline, and then you maybe get 50% salary retained or even double salary retained, that 220 grand to start the season can go a long way. You have to make compromises. You can't just prioritize everything. Do the Leafs really need someone who's just as good, maybe if not better, than Jack Campbell? Can they get by with just a competent backup that can play games and make the saves that you would expect them to make? And then maybe if there's an injury, would it be so bad if Michael Hutchison plays, I don't know, 5 or 10 games or so? Would that be such a bad thing? He did have a shutout last season. That is something that he did do. And he won 2 playoff games for the Colorado Avalanche just 2 years ago. And with the rumors on Anderson being that he doesn't necessarily want to take a pay cut from his previous contract with the Leafs at $5 million, I don't see that being an option. Maybe if you wanted to take a 1-year deal for anywhere between $2 and $3 million bucks, I can maybe see that sort of making sense. Maybe you're betting on him being healthy, and now you have Campbell. They can split the games or so, and maybe that's a better fit for him. Maybe he signs with a team that can give him that sort of situation so that he's not getting burned out and doesn't have to play while injured, sort of thing. But with him being 32 by the time next season rolls around, I don't think that he's a type of goalie that makes sense for the Leafs. I think if they want someone who they can commit a couple of years to and have some stability at that position. I don't have a definitive name that I can pick out of this list here and say, yeah, that's the guy that I would want. They all have their pros and cons, and it depends on what type of person you are, right? A guy like Driedger, the goaltending, if it's really important to you, you may want that. But then you have less money to spend elsewhere. I think it's about finding a happy medium. Maybe you want to take a risk on a guy like Mrazek, even though he has some injury troubles, he may be able to get you some value, right? He may not cost as much. Maybe you want old reliable in Jarl Halak. Maybe he takes a cheaper deal and that's some value to you. Maybe you want to reunite the Leafs with an old friend in Jim Reimer or Jonathan Bernier, right? It depends on what type of person you are as the goalie that you're going to lean towards based on the pros and cons. Maybe there's someone who comes available on the trade front that we don't really know of just yet. I know that the Leafs were interested in a guy like Darcy Kemper last offseason, but his rumored price was a first-round pick. They didn't like that, but he's only got a year left on his deal, and to pay any sort of premium for him, whether that be from the Coyotes or the Kraken, if they end up selecting him, with him just having a year left on his contract, you don't want to keep buying rental players and not being able to re-sign them, right? Eventually, you just want, some sort of stability at the position. I think that's something that Elliot Friedman has talked about, that the Leafs do want. Maybe one of the Columbus goalies, Korpisalo, but he doesn't necessarily have the greatest numbers. Merce Lincoln, he costs $4 million bucks. It's just like, there's pros and cons with all these guys. Me personally, I'm not necessarily happy that I can't pick out a definitive answer for you, or at least give you a top 3 here. But I think my journalism professors, as me being a journalism student, would just be happy that I didn't give an opinion in this video and I just presented the information as it was. So make sure to like the video if you did like it, and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way, especially over the next couple weeks or so.